Well, right now, yeah. But if you look at the... Welcome back, everybody. The most successful moneymaker in modern finance, Jim Simmons, has annual returns of his flagship fund Medallion that have actually outpaced those of Warren Buffett, George Soros, or Ray Dalio. The historically tight-lipped investor has finally spoken out to our next guest. Joining us right now is Greg Zuckerman. He's the author and special writer for the Wall Street Journal. His new book is out today. It's called The Man Who Solved the Market: How Jim Simmons Launched the Quant Revolution. And I read the article over the weekend and loved it. I think it's incredible to think about a guy who, when he was 40 years old, quit his profession teaching math, turned around and launched in a strip mall on Long Island. How did he make it to these levels?
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy thing. You would think the greatest modern-day moneymaker on Wall Street would be somebody who had some experience on Wall Street, and yet he's a complete outsider. Mathematician, was a code breaker, and as you suggest, for years struggled trying to find the formula to make it in the market, finally turned the corner, and the rest is history. But there's a lot of kind of lessons there for kind of everybody, I think.
What kind of lessons?
Resilience, the importance of models as opposed to kind of intuition. Too often we get caught up in stories when it comes to stocks. We get caught up in things like Uber and WeWork and all kinds of Theranos. And by using a model, and you look at the best companies today, all kinds of Amazon, Netflix, Tencent, it's all models, and that's the Simmons solution. By deferring to models and the scientific method, you don't fall for things like behavioral biases that we all kind of greed and fear kinds of problems.
Well, go ahead.
Just a question. As we've moved more towards passive investing, has he talked about how his ability to make better returns or worse returns has changed? Because
it's a really good question. So I've talked to people inside the firm about that, and it's a real problem or challenge, I'd say, if the market is changing. So the whole genius of Renaissance Technologies and Jim Simmons is that there are patterns in the market that we humans don't really pick up on, and their machines do. They use unbelievable data. They got data that nobody else has, and they pipe it in, and they can use these models. But what happens if the behavior of the market changes? And we'll see going forward. For now, there are enough dentists and people like me trading the market that they take advantage of. But we'll see if everybody goes to passive, then the nature of the market could change.
What was interesting, when you say they find information nobody else has, I mean, they find information did they go back thousands of years to find some of these things? I thought that's what I read in the piece.
As far as back in the 1700s. Now, a lot of it is just kind of curiosity. They don't necessarily use
what
it day-to-day.
What markets were they, like, looking at?
Commodity type
markets or
commodities, all kinds of, right. They're not the most liquid markets back then. But it can help if there's a curiosity within the firm. But for a long time, for decades, they had cleaner data and more data than anybody else. And it really is a huge advantage. And they were paying attention to these kind of things, the importance of big data, years before, like, Mark Zuckerberg was even finished with grade school.
So is it harder to compete now where everybody's doing big data and where computer speeds have just gotten so phenomenal? Big data is like the code word we've heard tossed around for the last several years.
Yeah, it's a good question. You would think, and yet they continue to outperform. They're doing a little bit better than the market this year. They've done better the last few years. But yeah, in the future, you wonder if they can keep it going. For now, they're still the preeminent investment firm going.
The other side of it is the tax efficiency of an investment like this. For the average investor, I think one of the things that people don't understand is the turnover is so high that it's all short-term capital gains.
Yes, don't try this at home.
Yes.
The average holding period for these guys is about 2 days. So they're not high frequency, they're not kind of flash traders, and yet they're not the kind of things where if you're tax advantaged, that's okay, but if you worry about taxes, that's not. They've done very creative things, and I write about it in the book, to shift from short-term gains to long-term gains, but the IRS has raised some questions, and we'll see if they have to pay back some of those profits.
You know, the whole idea of being able to game the system again is on other people not being able to catch up. And he's amazing in that he's continued to build this entire setup where he is doing just that. We've talked about 2 and 20, about how that can't last, but it can last for somebody who's actually getting massive outperformance. What does he think about hedge funds in general and who can do what he can do?
Yeah, no one really does what they do. So they don't really game the system as much as they look for patterns in the market that we all don't see. And there are a few day patterns. They could be shorter. They could be a little bit longer. But they're medium kind of term trading, as they call it.
I'm sorry. I think of that as gaming the system just because you're smarter than what everybody else is doing. I don't mean to suggest there's anything wrong with it. You're just getting smarter than everybody else and finding a way to beat it.
Sure, for sure. And yeah, for for the average sort of traditional investor who used to use an information advantage, I mean, one of the lessons from this story, I think, is how difficult it is for the traditional kind of investor to try to beat people like Jim Simons and other people with kind of the old traditional intuition, calling up companies, looking at balance sheets. There's more information out there that people can't digest as quickly as they used to, and you're competing with a guy like Jim Simons, who's a step ahead in terms of talent, too. I mean, they hired the best and the brightest from science, from mathematics. They don't even hire from Wall Street. It's a whole different way of organizing a firm and recruiting talent.
Did he ever talk about where he went wrong in any trades?
Oh, yeah, many. I mean, they don't do individual trades. Their idea is what they do that's different from others. They basically go 5,000 or so stocks long, 5,000 or so short. And they're doing trades that are relative to other things, relative to indexes, relative to the rest of the market, to other groups of stocks. And they've had a series of setbacks throughout the years. And I write about them in the book, especially 2007.
Have you ever seen where they get all the numbers in and Simons is there and there's the numbers, everything's figured out, it's all been plugged into the model, and someone says, so what do you think, Jim? What's your gut tell you on this one?
So the fascinating thing is that they themselves, as quants, they have to fight that instinct to some extent. So even last year, so Jim Simons is worth $23 billion. He is the preeminent quant, and the whole Wall Street is shifting to quant. 31% of all trading is quants. And yet last year, end of last year, the market was tanking. He's on vacation with his wife in Beverly Hills, sees the market going down, and he calls up his personal money manager and says, hey, shouldn't we be protecting here? Shouldn't we be shorting? So even after a lifetime, he's 81 years old. He's the king of this thing. Even he feels the kind of instincts that you and I do,
it just
right?
Seems like I wonder if that ever helps or hurts.
Well, they try not to override the system.
Right.
So, and they're scientists and mathematicians. They don't necessarily feel as emotional as you and I do. They're a kind of a different breed.
I feel no emotion. I don't know anything.
Okay.
I feel nothing. I'm numb. I don't. I like over. No, but I like over time.
Then you can work for Renaissance Technologies and not worry about your instinct and intuition. Good. And too often that leads to problems. And that is their thesis, that if you defer to models and the scientific method, then you can outperform.
Greg, thank you very much for coming in,
Sure.
and congratulations on the book.
Thank you very much.
The book, again, is called The Man Who Solved the Market, How Jim Simons Launched the Quant Revolution.